A good morning and welcome back to Morning Live. We now take a final look at your sports news for today. Now, this past weekend, we saw series victories for England as well as Ireland, and this has led to some asking if there is a power shift in world rugby. To talk about this and other rugby-related matters, we've roped in News 24 senior sports journalist Sibusiso Mjikeliso. Sibusiso, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Sports on Morning Live. A good morning to you.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with talking about the team that used to be the best in the world, New Zealand. Now, we know that about 6 months ago, they had a review of their rugby following a series loss to Ireland. Do you think that another review is necessary for them at this stage? And do you think that they are able to fix their problems with just about a year before the World Cup?
Yeah, I think New Zealand are in quite a bit of spot of bother because they're thinking about changing coaches, and they haven't changed coaches midway between World Cups since 2002 when John Mitchell took over from Wayne Smith. That's a long time ago. That's 20 years ago. Since then, they've had good succession planning from Graham Henry to Steve Hansen to Ian Foster, who's the current man in charge. And in that time, that good succession planning has led to 2 successive World Cups in 2011 at home and in 2015 in the UK. So this is a time of huge transition for the All Blacks. They're not looking as sharp as we know them to be, and having lost 4 of the last 5 tests, that's criminal in All Black culture, in New Zealand culture, and having lost a series defeat at home for the first time since professional rugby came into existence. That is huge for All Black rugby, and to Ireland, a Northern Hemisphere team. You spoke about a power shift. Now Ireland sit at the top of the world rankings, and they're followed by France, then the Springboks, then the All Blacks in 4th, the lowest the All Blacks have ever been in their history.
Now, as you speak about Ian Foster, would you say there's probably a disconnect between the leadership and the All Blacks with him and Sam Cane and the rest of the team? And at this moment, are they playing the right type of game plan?
Look, the All Blacks really are ever going to play one style of rugby, the one we know them to. They're going to be devastating on the counter-attack. They're going to play on the border of legality and illegality. They're going to move the ball hard and fast, but we've seen cracks in their defense. We've seen lacks of concentration. I mean, Ireland scored tries within 5 minutes of every game, of all 3 games that they played against the All Blacks, and one even in the second minute. Keith Earls, I think in the start of the series, Keith Earls got a 5-minute try down on the right-hand touchline. So, and in the last game, Josh van der Fleer scored early. So there are concentration problems, there are culture problems, and we've seen this before in 2008 when they lost 3 times to the Springboks. They had a huge culture camp where they had to hash the problems out, and that led to a cultural revolution, which subsequently led to the 2011 World Cup winning squad coming together and doing things that were able to move the team forward. I think they need to go back there. They're thinking about changing the coach, but that might not be the solution if the same problems persist, no matter who's in charge.
Indeed. Let's take the conversation to another side now. I want to talk about England and Australia. Now, we saw England come from behind to secure a victory against Australia. And I mean, the hosts really did have a long injury list, but they did seem more competitive despite the fact that they've been playing in Super Rugby that doesn't involve any South African teams.
Yeah, look, Australia are well coached. Dave Rennie is a very, very good coach. He won Super Rugby twice as the coach of the Chiefs. So they're usually a team that relies on good coaching. In the past, your Eddie Jones's, when he was still Australian coach, made them very competitive, took them to the 2003 final at home, which unfortunately they lost to England. They've been one of those teams where they consume good coaching culture, even though their Super Rugby teams haven't always been the best. But you have to remember that Australia actually had more Super Rugby winning teams than South Africa, comfortably. The Brumbies won Super Rugby, the Waratahs and the Reds won Super Rugby, whereas South Africa only had the Bulls win that tournament 3 times in its history. So we underestimate sometimes how good the culture of rugby is in Australia, because it's not, rugby union is not the #1 sport there, and they're not really exciting if you watch the New Zealand derbies, if you watch the Rebels against the Force, for instance, or Brumbies, Reds, they're not the most exciting games to watch. But when they come together in a Wallaby jersey, that's when you see the best out of them. Your Michael Hoopers, your Tavita Kurindranis, your Marika Koriobetis, even Reece Hodge, who came back into the team at number 15, has done very, very well. But they didn't overcome England, but they were very competitive. They beat they beat the Springboks twice last year in the Rugby Championship, we forget. And they humiliated the Springboks in the second test. So we might castigate the Australian rugby as not the greatest rugby we'll ever want to watch, but they're a very competitive nation.
And I do want to chat about the Boks as well. Now, we did see that series win this past weekend, but there were a lot of questions asked about the tactics. Now, do you think that Jake was wrong in any of the questions that he raised before that third and final test in Cape Town?
I wouldn't necessarily say that Jake was wrong. I think the Boks took exception to the manner in which the concerns were raised. Jake is a sharp knife. He's only going to say it one way. He'll call it like he sees it. He felt that the Springbok platform isn't the place to learn. And the Boks felt otherwise. Obviously, Mzwandile Stick coming out hard, saying that before the last test against Wales, that, if you're not learning, you're not growing. And they've created a culture of learning, continuous learning. So it is a clash of styles and cultures. I'd put it like that. Jake is very old school, obviously, and we're talking about a new sort of Springbok culture where there's collective leadership and collective decision making, and basically a new breed of sort of management where there's not one figure that determines everything at once. As we can see, Rassie is still involved in some parts. Selection is put to committee with the assistant coaches, with Deon David Stick, who I mentioned, and a lot of the others that are involved in the background. So I think for me, it's just a difference of opinion. I wouldn't say one is wrong over the other. Jake did make some very good points in the column that he wrote. But obviously, if you're internal, you're going to defend your own structures, you're going to defend the way you do things, which have won you the World Cup, and you're going to stick to those. And in the end, I'd say the Springboks came through for the better, because they closed out the series, and they know their players better because they tested their depth in the second game in Bloemfontein. So for them, the net result was good, even though it came with huge risk.
Indeed, and as I wrap up with you, let's talk about Yuri Roo quickly. We don't have a lot of time. What is the latest in that, and how is this saga likely to end?
How it's likely to end, I cannot tell you. It's a moving target. Things are changing almost by the daily. But there are conversations, like we reported, taking place between Roo's lawyers as well as the legal personnel advising SA Rugby. At the moment, I'd say the case file, if I can put it like that, is sitting with the HR advisor, Lewis Rosen, to SA Rugby in terms of how they're going to handle and manage this issue. They received a legal opinion from Wim Trengrove as well as Professor Michael Katz. So that legal opinion was then taken forward to Rosen, who is then in conversations with the representatives of Yuri Roo. It's a very tough matter to negotiate. Roo is still under contract until 2024, which was renewed not too long ago. So you'd imagine there'd be a huge financial fallout, if not legal, should whatever decision be made by SA Rugby, because these Stellenbosch transgressions took place before
Prior
he
he
joined
was at
FA
Cambridge,
Rugby. So it's very intricate and it's developing all the time.
Sbu, thank you so much for your time this morning. Do have a blessed day ahead.
Cheers, thank you.
That is Sbu Mjikeliso, News 24 senior sports journalist, just talking about all things rugby. That's how we wrap up your sports news for today. For SABC Sports News, right here on Morning Live, I am Vosiwe Ngcobo. Good morning. We're taking now through to an ad break.